Welcome to another edition of What Barrie's Talking About from Barrie 360. I'm Dan Blakely. On this week's program, his background is media and communications. He has recently been involved in social issues related to the homeless, and now Paul Larche is getting recognition as an author, winning an award for his first book. Seven Williams Treaty's First Nations, the Chippewas of Rama among them, have partnered with the federal and provincial governments to become owners of a nuclear reactor. Chief Ted Williams joins us to discuss the reasons why. A lot of people have been looking for shade the last few days as we sweated through another heat wave. Trees are a good place to start, and we have lots of them. The Nottawasaga Valley Conservation Authority recently celebrated a milestone, having planted 4.5 million trees since its inception. That's significant. We'll tell you why after this. Welcome back to What Barrie's Talking About. I'm Dan Blakely, local businessman, entrepreneur. Paul Larche, who cut his teeth in media and communications, sales and marketing, is now an award-winning author with his first book, which kind of wraps it all together. But we'll let him tell the story. He's with Ian McLennan.
Paul, you're an award-winning author. Tell us about the book and the awards that were bestowed upon you.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me, Ian. And the award is from Can Reads. It was a bit of a surprise, frankly, because I'm a novice author, and this is a nonfiction book. It's more of a business marketing book, but it was validating because I think it just talked about that there's a demand for what the book talks about, and the book really what it talks about is how does the brain make decisions, and I approached it very much from a marketing, branding, and business point of view, because that's basically how I learned what I put in the book over 45 years in this business. But it's just very gratifying to see some recognition and sales for people that seem to be getting something out of it.
Well, your background, obviously, media and communications, Ontario Association of Broadcaster, Hall of Fame. Why did you write this book, though? Who did you directly gear it at?
Well, the backstory is very radio-related, which you'll appreciate. But when I started out in radio, I started out in Timmins a long, long time ago and got into marketing and sales. I was always confused as to why some campaigns, marketing, branding campaigns worked and some others didn't, despite the fact that they seemed to be, very well orchestrated and came across with clear facts and all the right reasons why you should consider purchasing a product or service, but didn't seem to make the cash register ring. And it wasn't until I had a couple of promotions and ended up working in Toronto with Telemedia Network Radio. We worked with the Blue Jays and the Maple Leafs back in the 90s, that I had an opportunity to work with some of the biggest agencies in the world, and through their marketing departments, learned that really what drives any decision is based on emotion, not on your facts first. And it was that realization when I ended up leaving that was my dream job and bought my first station, which was in Midland in 1996. It was CICZ FM, which became Kix 104 and then Kix 106. But there was 6 employees there, and it was losing money. But the idea was that I would try some of these techniques and see if they would give us a bit of an advantage at the local level. And it ended up working very well, and our company grew, and some of the employees work here now, which makes my heart very happy. But now that I've sold the stations, I figured that this is something that other people can use. It's not kind of a secret sauce anymore, and I just wanted to get out there and share it.
And was that human nature? You talk about emotion and how we respond, whether it's a business conception or walking into a grocery store or a Walmart or what have you?
All of that. The book is called The Divided Brain.
Yeah.
It's a metaphor, and it's not kind of the left-right hemisphere that some people think of. It's just more of a metaphor that's based on evolutionary psychology and evolution in general. The old part of the brain we share some DNA in there going back 475 million years, going back to lizards. That's some people refer to it as the lizard brain. right up to the the neocortex, which I call the new brain, and that's from an evolutionary point of view is relatively recent. And this is really what separates humans from all other species out there. Is ours just seems to be very hyper developed. But it is new software. And what I try to get across in the brain is, and this is something that, again, I studied a lot and learned and seen results in marketing and branding, but also validated in medical research,
Mhm.
is that we are emotional machines first and thinking machines second. And if you want to get any point across, it doesn't matter if it's in business or to your family, to a spouse, to a friend, or even to yourself, frankly, because often we fool ourselves, is that you have to understand that we're emotional beings first, and that is the gateway to getting into talking to somebody and making a connection. And that old brain is always looking out for things that are related to survival. It's looking out for, one point it was for where's our next meal, and to make sure that we're not in a position where we might be threatened. That safety was obviously a big thing. That we weren't going to be eaten by a saber-toothed tiger. All of these things from the savannah. But that still's what drives us today. But in the modern world that we're in today, where we have such an abundance and our safety is for the most part, pretty
Right.
secure, it plays tricks on us.
You talk about, you're about paternicity?
Patternicity.
Pattern city?
Yeah.
There goes my lingo.
Patternicity. Yeah.
Yeah. What does that mean in terms of I guess a quirk of human nature? Especially if you're a small business and you're trying to stand out against the bigger players, the corporations.
Well, in a couple of ways, patternicity is just basically a term that says the old brain is exceptionally good at pattern recognition, and often we see patterns. We do it all the time. We see patterns in clouds. We'll see a face or a horse, or we look at the constellations and we see animals, and we base a lot of our decisions on where those animals are. Based on the fact that we see a pattern up with a bunch of stars, which of course is completely random. And some people see Jesus on toast. I mean, we just very much are tuned to see patterns and then try to make meaning out of that pattern. And from an evolutionary point of view, that makes perfect sense because the ancestors that did that, if they saw something that a rustle, like I said, in the bush, and that pattern turned out to be a threat, they ended up being able to pass on their genes to the next generation, and the ones that were more cavalier ended up not doing that. So we do tend to see patterns, and for the most part, those patterns are correct, but sometimes they're not. And patternicity is where we see a lot of that today. Is that we tend to see things that in things that aren't there. We see the
Mhm.
meaningless. There's meaningless noise there, but we find meaningful information out of it. And because of again the evolutionary way our brain developed, and for all the right reasons, where we tend to want to make sure that we can feel safe, we will sometimes add meaning to that. And that's, how we bring rationality to everything from conspiracy theories to almost anything that we believe
Even
that
our
seems
life.
to be a little out there,
Right.
is because our old brain is just trying to comfort ourselves to know that, okay, that there's something there, and this is how it makes sense, and let's move on to the next possible threat.
One of the reviews said, which was a complimentary about your book, is it's not technical. You could understand it. It was an easy read compared to some other books that are not similar,
Mhm.
but on the same sort of path, same sort of focus. But yours was less technical.
That was by design. The reason like I said, I put out the book is because we talked to advertisers over the last 30 or 40 years, and we had also a marketing and branding agency, and we needed to be able to explain to them human behavior from a marketing point of view in a relatively short period of time. So this was my every time we have a new client come in, my first half an hour with them was explaining to them this divided brain theory, so that they could say, yes, that makes perfect sense to me. So that when we started telling them that no, you want to lead with emotion and not with facts and figures, that it would resonate better with them.
But you've been in the corporate boardroom, you've been in the hospital foundation
Mhm.
boardroom at RVH. Is there a simple trick to spot which brain is controlling the conversation, whether it's at work or home?
Well, the simple rule of thumb I talk about in the book is that the old brain makes all of our decisions. And then the new brain, actually, its de facto mode is to rationalize that decision. And that is to conserve energy. So it's first, and we see that every day because we make irrational decisions and then we'll justify why we made that decision. And every time I do a talk on this and I start cueing the audience, everybody's hand will go up. A simple example I talk about in the book is I'm an amateur musician, and I own 37 guitars, and that seems like crazy to some people, but I can justify to anybody why I have each one of those guitars. Some people it could be shoes, some people it could be very very expensive watch or car, but they can
Is it something they're
rationalize it.
passionate about, or is it just something
No, it's because the new brain wants to rationalize. It
Okay.
wants to back up the old brain. More often than not, if you give it some real rational thought, it probably won't make sense on the surface. But from a marketing and branding point of view, what you're trying to do is with a brand is to create trust with the possible customers. So they have to feel that what you're telling them with is they're threatened. They're not threatened in terms of safety, or are you taking advantage of me? All these kinds of things. Understanding that really allows you to be able to position your message in a way that will really resonate with people, as long as your product or service delivers on what you say it's going to do.
Did you come up with that when you were on the RVH board with the foundation with the campaign? Most recent?
The Keep Life Wild
Yeah.
campaign. No, that was actually an agency that we worked with. I was on the board at the time, but I endorsed it very much because it was exactly, this agency knows exactly what I'm talking about in the book. And again, my book is not something that anybody that has worked in branding and marketing for a long time would find interesting because they already know it. This is for people who are just new to it, and maybe sometimes they're trying to figure out why do we make sometimes these irrational decisions? Why do we, why do we stick with a certain point of view, even though in our heart of hearts we probably know that it's still wrong? These
We do
are
it
all
anyway?
these are all things that we do that have a perfectly good reason behind them from an evolutionary point of view why we do them. And what I try to talk about in the book too is if you realize and you understand that you can do something called metacognition. And metacognition is really kind of thinking about thinking, where you can disengage the new brain from the old brain. And in the book, I talk about how they're two interconnected gears, because that is the way they work, is the big old brain drives the new brain. But reflective thought, anytime we want to sit down and give something sober second thoughts, is really disengaging and letting the new brain work on its own. But it is effort. That's why, doing a math test is tough in school, and doing our taxes is tough, today. Like these are things that we resist because they eat up a lot of energy. But I think today, especially with AI and the amount of information that we're getting, and the way it's so biased, for business reasons, it's being delivered to us in a biased way. But if you don't understand how you're being targeted and how it's playing to you, you're opening yourself up to a really slippery slope.
Are you challenged by that still today, despite all your background? And
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's you see it so much in politics now, and there's media outlets, and I'm not picking sides or anything like that. It doesn't matter if you're left or right, because a bunch of different media have very biased positions, but they're doing that because it is a smart business point of view. People are very confirmation bias heavy, and they like to, hear what they already feel is right, and they'd like to also hear what the opposing team is doing wrong, and that's just being reaffirmed to them and that's just triggering a bunch of dopamine all day long. So we tend to gravitate towards whatever it is, and like I said, it's both sides of the political spectrum do it, and sometimes you have to put yourself in a position to say, okay, listen, they're playing on old brain levers that are, affecting everything from, making me afraid of what the future might hold to, things like scarcity and things that we think that, can affect us if we don't back up the right type of people. Once you see that you're being played a little bit, it makes things a lot clearer, and you tend to look at things, with sober second thoughts, and maybe understand who is giving me this information. Is there any motive behind the reason that they're giving this information? And more often than you'll find that there is. Somebody has an agenda and they're trying to push it forward, and they know how to. They're using techniques in my book that I didn't invent. I'm just making it easier for people to understand, but they're definitely playing all those old brain levers.
And your book's online that can be purchased?
You can buy it online in a printed version, virtually any bookstore. Amazon is probably the easiest way, but you can also order it through, Chapters or Indigo, or and there's an audio version as well, Audible.
7 First Nations, including Chippewas of Rama, have become owners of a nuclear reactor, a historic step forward, says Chief Ted Williams. Here again is Ian McLennan.
Just recently, the 7 Williams Treaties First Nations, which includes the Chippewas of Rama, have struck a commercial partnership with the federal and provincial governments. You're going to become owners of a new nuclear reactor. How did this all come about, and why is this so important to Rama but the other First Nations involved?
This has come about as a result of discussions that the First Nations have had with various crown corporations, provincial governments, and federal governments on the expectation of First Nations to be players, participants, not just being consulted, but have the opportunity to invest in different elements that are across our treaty lands.
And the Ottawa and Ontario, they're providing loan guarantees of $700 million. How does that work?
So what's happening is through the province of Ontario, we have what is called the Guaranteed Investment Loan Fund. So it's through that entity that the First Nations are being provided the opportunity through a loan to participate in the development of the small modular reactors.
Now, Chief, the Chiefs described the deal. You touched on it briefly as a historic step forward. Put that into context for us.
Well, we know that Darlington, for instance, the development of the Darlington nuclear plant, started in the early 70s and was a major project at the time. During that period of time, no thought was given to involving First Nations in any capacity. Although they did do their due diligence regarding environmental assessments and all that kind of stuff, but we weren't on the radar at that time. As a result of the growth of First Nations, the understanding that our leadership has had over a great number of years, 40, 50 years, and an openness from not just province and federal government to acknowledge that. And so when opportunities have come about, as I've indicated before, today as First Nations, we're not just participating as right holders and expecting to be consulted on, but we're now in a position to invest, partner, and become owners.
You're players, are you?
We are players. We're at the table, and this decision reflects it's a deliberate move on our behalf, to play a direct role in assisting and enabling critical infrastructure.
And also in that quote, it was, you're creating opportunities for our own communities. That's a quote from all the chiefs. So when we talk about Rama, when you say opportunities, what does it mean for the people living in Rama?
First of all, this is a long-term investment that will bring returns to the community for a number of years to come. But it also has an opportunity for individuals to participate in construction activities. There's an opportunity to provide for individuals or and organizations if they're in business. Procurement is another opportunity, and it creates long-term capacity. It strengthens the participation of our First Nations in an industry that is there's demand. There's huge demand for power. As we know, the population has increased in Southern Ontario and in the country as well. And with the increase in population becomes the need for more power generation as other plants kind of have lived their life. And so all of this means that we are not just, like I say, participating financially, but we are participating as individuals and organizations, entrepreneurs to help build and mold and hold accountable, each other for the proper development of these SMRs.
When this came together, was it the federal provincial government that approached the Williams Treaties First Nations, or did you go to them, or was this all part of the package when it was, unveiled, so to speak?
Well, we know that as investors, we First Nations across the province of Ontario have already invested in Ontario Hydro going back several years. So it's through that chain that there has been known interest of First Nations by corporations, in this place OVG, to take a look at what developments are happening and how can we participate.
And sir, Darlington, I believe, has a bit of a personal ring for you. Is that correct through family?
Well, my wife, her grandfather, he I recall him driving to Darlington every day. He was a carpenter to help build the Darlington plant 50, 50, almost 60 years ago, 55 years ago.
So you can imagine coming full circle.
So there's a little bit of that, and obviously I was just a young man at the time, and so here we are, 55 years hence, and as a leader, the Chippewas of Rama are playing a leading role with the other First Nations on the development of a small modular reactor that's going to bring energy, needed energy, to Southern Ontario.
The Nottawasaga Valley Conservation Authority just celebrated the planting of 4.5 million trees, been sticking them in the ground and looking after them since 1965, and apparently there's always room for more, not just on authority lands, but maybe on your land as well. Here again is Ian McLennan with the authority's manager of forests, Rick Grillmeyer.
The city of Barrie is part of the Nottawasaga Valley Conservation Authority watershed, and recently NVCA marked a milestone, 4.5 million trees planted. What does that mean for the general public? Why is that so important?
Oh, trees and the growth of trees are just an integral part of a healthy landscape. Whether you have a nice street tree in the city of Barrie, whether you have a windbreak on an open field, whether you happen to own, 20 acres in Springwater Township and there's some bush at the back, trees all fit in for everyone.
Now, you launched the Conservation Authority launched its tree planting program in 1965, working with landowners. How did that all come about, and what is the process?
So for the people in 1965, way back then, the province had a big planting program, but the conservation authorities were formed and we were planting on our own lands. We were planting beside water courses. Over time, programs have changed. The need is still there. When landowners are suddenly interested in planting trees, they give me a call. What they're interested fits our program. I meet with them. We take a look at the property. I give them a proposal, say, this is what we can do. These are the grants that we can access. And if the landowner decides to plant trees, we plant them the following year. And if not, that's okay. We have a nice visit.
So do they have to be an adjacent to NVCA property, or can it be anywhere in your, so to speak, coverage area?
It can be anywhere in the coverage area.
And again, what sort of characteristics or what sort of sort of resume does that property have to present to you that this is viable and can be done?
We really are good at planting large numbers of trees really quickly. So we need about 2 acres. So as a rural landowner, primarily you need about 5 acres. We need 2 acres of open land. So we're really good at doing large areas quickly. We can't plant a tree in someone's backyard. But for that particular landowner, we do have our Arbor Day tree sale where we're trying to help urban landowners as well. But for the planting program, it's basically rural.
And what prompts a landowner to call the conservation authority and offer up some some property? What's the trigger there sometimes?
Oh my goodness, there's a huge range. We have landowners who just, they've got 5 acres they can't grow a decent crop on. They decide, well, let's try our hand at trees. We've got landowners who are thinking of a legacy for their grandkids. We've got landowners who are tired of the snow drifting in around the house. Maybe they want to put a windbreak in. When I meet with a landowner, I do ask them, why are you interested in trees? Because that helps to set what I recommend for the planting. But the reason is the range is just huge.
And do we? I know maybe it's. Do we take it for granted? We go through. Your properties at Nottawasaga Valley, the county of Simcoe Forest. There are the trees, but there's so much work that goes into it. And what's the importance of the planting of the trees in terms of the ecosystem and benefits to you and I and the public?
Okay, so way back about 30 years ago, Environment Canada did a study where they tried to figure out, in a watershed, what's the sweet spot in terms of forest cover where everything seems to function as it should? And it's about 30%, where river valleys need trees beside them, forest blocks should be kind of connected. And so when a landowner decides that they want to plant 5 acres of trees, if it happens to be beside a water course, that's even better. But even if it's a standalone planting, it sequesters carbon, it produces oxygen, creates wildlife habitat, and maybe 30 years from now they're able to sell some timber. That's an added bonus. But a lot of what we take for granted in our ecosystem, trees are almost like a foundation for that.
And I recall the media release you sent out, and I would assume it's on NVCA website. Over the years, seeing the growth when you planted the trees and how much property they have, taken over, so to speak, in a good way. You get a real eye view of the importance of it and how it was mapped out.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I live in Collingwood, and on my drive to work, I pass about 12 planting sites, and it's been really satisfying, fulfilling to see those trees grow over time. In fact, when we're out on a family trip, I often get reminded to maybe pay more attention to the road and not to some windbreak off in the distance.
And that's our program for this week. Thanks to Ian for his input, to Logan for his technical touch, to Gio for getting the word out, and to you for listening. If you like what you've heard, please subscribe to What Barrie's Talking About. You can also keep up with What Barrie's Talking About on Blue Sky and X at Barrie360, on our website, Barrie360.com, and there's our daily Kickstart podcast, available from any streaming service and on our website. I'm Dan Blakely. Hope you'll join us again next week.